all of you are more beautiful and magical than you could ever dream. The only thing that's in your way is some old patterning, and that is revisable now. It doesn't have to be hard. It's time. It's actually time for it to be easier.
Hello, and welcome to the Seeker Solutions Summit. I'm Suara, and I'm so excited to introduce today our guest, Michelle Masters. Hi, Michelle. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Suara. I'm glad to be here.
Beautiful. We're so glad to have you. I love this introduction that you have in the bio. It's by Sasha Ferguson, and she says, if Yoda and Glinda the Good Witch had a baby, that would be you, Michelle Masters. I
Yeah,
love
thank
that.
you. Yoda, yeah. Unfortunately, in that equation, I think I got my father's looks.
I love it. It's so funny. I think it's such a great description of you, your energy, your joy, your wisdom, all combined together. You are the coach's coach. You've been called the coach's coach, and you're a personal development trainer. You use neuroscience-based change techniques, family constellation work, quantum healing modalities. That's a lot. Can you please tell us about your journey to the work that you do?
Yeah. Well, I was looking for something that had meaning, and I was looking for a while, and then somebody put a flyer in my hand for this NLP free seminar, which is neuro-linguistic programming. Worst name ever, by the way. I think National Socialist Party was already taken, so that was the second worst name they could find. But I went to this workshop, and within half an hour, I'm like, oh, I could feel things shift. Like, I did 4 years of therapy with an absolute saint, like, love her. And she did so much for me, but the patterning didn't change. Like, I had a lot of self-acceptance, a lot of self-awareness. I had emotional vocabulary, but I still had the same issues. But at this workshop, I could feel stuff actually shift, even in this little free workshop. And I'm like, if they can do that in like 15 minutes, what can they actually do? And so I found out. I took the training. I was a trainer for them for 20. I was training before I was even done with my training, and I worked for them for 25 years.
Wow, wow.
Yeah. And then developed my own set of courses to take people, to use these tools to take people through shifts and transformations so they could have what they want.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because the work, what called you to that work really was seeing that change, that it was real, it was visceral, you saw a change happen. It's really where the rubber meets the road type of thing. Like, it's not just theory and things that we're talking about, but it really is that change that we're really looking for. But NLP wasn't your final stop. You've layered on a lot of things on top of that. Can you tell us about that as well?
Yeah. And so I started the NLP training in 1994. So by the time people see this, that'll be like 30 years, right? And then in 1996, I encountered the work of Bert Hellinger, who was doing family constellation work, and I loved it. And so every time he came to the Bay Area, I went to his workshops, I read his book, I watched his videos, I did his facilitation training, and it seemed to be a piece that had been missing from the NLP toolbox, because there was some stuff that just wouldn't shift. And this Bert Hellinger family constellation work was about deep unconscious family and ancestral loyalties. And that stuff that the NLP couldn't touch.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for it, which I can tell you later if you like, because it's not, most of the stuff that has us stuck is stored in our neurology. It's neurologically based. Yeah. But this stuff, this family, these family ties, these ancestral ties, is not stored in the neurology. And so the NLP wouldn't touch it. So that was a huge piece in helping us to relieve a lot of the pain people carry. Because someone said this to me. They said, I've heard, from a healer that 60% of the pain we carry is not our own. And I said, I think that's a conservative estimate.
Wow. Wow.
After all these years, I think that estimate is really low. And so this was a way to start to work with that stuff that everything else wouldn't touch.
Wow, that's amazing. So if a lot of our stuff we do carry in our neurologies, when you say that, you mean our biology, right? Like
our neurological nets, like our beliefs are actually stabilized in neurological nets, and they're stabilized in parts of the brain that we don't have conscious access to. For the most part, our basic beliefs about ourselves and the world are not stored up here in our conscious cortex. Wow. And so that's why, like, therapy, doesn't change the patterning. And that's why somebody going to a workshop and deciding, I want to believe this now, and so I choose to believe it,
Yep.
that's fine, but it doesn't change the original belief because it's stored in a different part of the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to that ancestral stuff, the cultural stuff, things that are kind of, in the atmosphere that we pick up on, we hold on to, where do we hold that?
It seems to be in some sort of ancestral cloud, like the A cloud instead of the I cloud. It is like it really is this field of consciousness,
Yeah.
and it's much more of a quantum event. And so it is not stored in the neurology. It is stored, and it's not driven by survival or fear, which is how most of our beliefs are actually held in our as survival patterning. They're fear based.
Mhm.
Actually, most of our limiting beliefs are fear based.
Right.
Most of the suffering um, contracts that we take on for our family, our ancestors, are driven by love, not fear, which
Mm,
is part of why it's so hard to shift them. It's much easier to shift something that's coming from fear than from love because the wattage on love is so much stronger.
yeah.
And people are much more willing to give up on stuff they're doing out of fear than stuff they are driven to do by love.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
powerful. That statement, that idea is a really powerful one. So, how do you help people make those shifts, especially with things that are hooked in with an energy of love?
Yeah. Well, the ancestral shifts, those are the hardest things to shift, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
Like it's actually much easier to revise like traumatic patterning from, if a trauma happens when somebody's two.
Mm.
It's not, I mean, that's terrible, but the revising it, there's a way forward that's fairly clear.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody took on the family lineage of suffering or is trying to suffer for someone in the family, or worst case scenario, they're trying to heal the family, which will never work.
Mm,
Never work. Never been a child born in the history of humanity who did not want to heal their family.
mm.
Also, never been a child born in the history of humanity who has pulled it off.
Yeah. Mhm.
And
Wow.
yeah, and so much of our energy gets directed towards this thing we cannot do because we don't have the right. Free will says you don't have the right to take somebody else's pain, heal their pain, or carry their pain. Like that's theirs. That's for them. That's their path,
Yeah.
not yours. And so yeah, so that stuff, there are some ways that we can start to acknowledge because it's hard to change something you don't even know is there.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And so some of it starts with pointing out, like, oh, by the way, this thing that feels like yours, actually not yours.
Yeah.
And then some acknowledgement. There's a whole set of tools. I won't go into it, that I learned from Bert Hellinger and have expanded on, to try to get people to acknowledge what they've been doing and hopefully notice the futility of it.
Yeah.
And with deep love and respect, kind of let that go, um, and allow themselves to move forward because that's good for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting that you brought up this thing about healing for others in your family.
Mhm.
Um, I've heard of soul families and soul contracts that we come in, kind of lifetime contracts, agendas that we have to come in.
Mhm.
And as part of those agendas that we create, sometimes there is people that come in and, they feel like, well, I'm here to, bring light to my family. There's this sort of destructive pattern,
Mhm.
negativity within this family unit. And part of what I want to do is bring light to that. And it kind of skirts really close to what you were saying,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
Why would we make those agreements while being, we're making them while we are still sort of
Hmm.
connected to that field of unity?
Hmm.
Why would we make those agreements then when we don't, when it's not really our right to do something like that through the free will?
Well, here's where all your power is. Like the way to actually stop the destructive patterning is not to take over other people's free will and change theirs.
Hmm.
It's to not pick the patterning up and keep carrying it,
Hmm.
to let it go and choose something different in your life.
Yeah.
Like that we have full power to do. We have full authority, every right.
Yeah.
And you have no idea. Rumi said when I was young, and clever, I wanted to change the world. Now I'm old and wise and I change myself.
Yeah.
But people have no idea when you change it for you,
Is that enough?
oh my God,
Yeah.
because that's where all your superpower lies.
Yeah.
And that is so much more than enough.
Yeah.
It is so much more than enough.
Mm.
And we don't know why other people chose the path they chose.
Yeah.
And so it's not our place to interrupt that or change that, right? If someone comes to you professionally for help, that's a different thing. They are making that choice.
Right.
But when we try to take on our family burdens, that's us saying, you clearly are incapable of doing this, which is on some level disrespectful because they made their choices for a reason.
Right. There's a little judgment in there or
Oh,
something.
yeah, it's a little disrespectful. Great love comes, it's very sweet,
Yeah.
but it's kind of disrespectful. And there's this like, I will do it for you. And when I went to college in Michigan and I grew up in Miami. So my first winter driving on ice, I had no reference for it. And I
Mm.
had to move that winter, and it's hilly where I went to college. And I had borrowed a friend's station wagon, loaded up all my stuff in the back. So it was really heavy, came
Yep.
down this hill, plowed right into a flower bed.
Wow.
This gaggle of freshman girls who never traveled in groups of less than 20 surrounded the car, pulled me out, and let go. And I went right back in. This happened 3 times because I still didn't, they kept pulling me out, but I still didn't know how to drive on ice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if we keep rescuing people,
Yeah.
they don't find their way out or get what they want out of it.
Yeah.
And I've had people argue with me, usually people in their 20s or early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
By the time someone gets to their late 30s, 40s, and especially 50s, it's like really clear, oh no, they're not going to change. If they do, it's on their timeline, not mine. So it's much easier the older people get.
Right.
Because young people still have hope.
Some kind of belief in some ideal vision, which is really wonderful. That's all
Yeah.
perfect as well. We need that
Yeah.
as well as part of the
Mhm.
overall formula. So that's beautiful.
Mhm.
So wow, these are like really big things that you're talking about in shifting
Mhm.
with people. Do you have any stories of transformation that maybe can ground this information for us? Do you have a story that can help us see like what does that mean really? Yeah.
Well, there's thousands, so it's hard to
I'm
choose.
sure. I'm
I know
sure.
it's hard to choose, but so I'll talk first about a belief one, and
Okay.
then I'll talk about a family loyalty one. Okay.
Beautiful.
And these beliefs can be about anything, but I'm going to choose one that was about relationship because it was just so clear. I mean, it's always clear, but this woman came to work with me because she had really unuseful beliefs around men.
Mm.
So we worked on changing those beliefs, like literally rewiring things for her. And 2 weeks later, she writes me this email to say, what the hell's going on with all the men in the world? They're all being so nice to me. Like when her beliefs shifted, the outside world shifted, right? And she couldn't understand it. Not only was she like meeting and attracting different kinds of men, but even the men she already knew, she was eliciting different behavior from them.
Wow.
Because her beliefs shifted. Our beliefs filter our reality. We don't perceive reality as it is.
Yeah.
We perceive it through our filters. So like if you have beliefs that you have to work hard to make money, guess what? You will have to work hard to make money. The single biggest thing I hear from people who've taken like my money magic workshop
Yeah.
is they will say, I don't understand how this happened. I didn't do anything differently and my income doubled or sometimes it tripled or quadrupled,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because their beliefs shifted. So that's on the belief side of it.
Beautiful.
On the family loyalty piece, I had this lady, I only saw her once. She came to see me. She was referred by doctors. And the second she walked in the room, my office, I thought, what the hell happened to your mother? But that would have freaked us both out. So I didn't ask. And she'd come because she had this terrible, horrible, debilitating neck pain, chronic. She'd had it her whole life. She was 38.
Wow.
And it was so bad. She swore she would never do surgery, but it was so bad. She finally went to surgeons and they said, look, there's nothing we can do. There's no surgical cause. So we were doing some family history and I asked her a question about her mother and she started to answer. And then she said, oh, wait, do you mean my biological mother? I said, are you adopted? And she said, yes. At this point, I'm like on full alert, whoop, whoop, whoop. Because when kids are adopted, the pressure of those family loyalties goes sky high. Because it's a way to connect. When they can't connect through love, they will often connect through pain or trauma. So she said, well, I just found out 2 years ago. Now she'd had this pain her whole life. She said, my mother was murdered. And I said, murdered how? And she said, blunt trauma to the head and her throat was slit. So all this head neck trauma, right? So this was her way of both trying to suffer some like her mother and be close to her mother. So
Mm.
as we were working there, we got found a way for her to actually connect to her mother that wasn't through the pain. And at the end of the session, she went, "Oh my God, that's so weird," because the pain was gone.
Oh my goodness.
And a couple years later, I was in a Target shopping, and someone came around the corner with their shopping cart and shrieked and ran at me with their cart. And she said, "That's her. That's the woman who changed my life." And as much as I'd love to take credit for changing her life, it was actually the having a way to connect to her mother that wasn't through pain that
Mhm.
made all the difference.
Wow. Wow.
Right?
That is an incredible story. Just the fact that it involves the body, the
Mhm.
physiology. And
Yeah.
that was a condition that, we're talking about the physical, shifting the physical realm here. And that was based in these thought beliefs and systems and where she was putting her energy. And then having it shift almost instantly, it sounds like within a
Yeah.
session.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Like that's so powerful to have these thoughts affect so quickly the physical and create change in that kind of way.
Yeah, and it was easier for it to change super fast because it was actually in the cloud, right? This wasn't neurologic. I mean, it wasn't old beliefs. It was that family loyalty thing, which
Mm,
is sort of non-local, is sort of quantum, and so things can shift much faster. Even, um, but yeah, that was quite stunning. But I have that all the time. People have that experience either around, money or love or health. That when the beliefs shift or the family loyalties let go,
yeah.
things just seem to all start to work.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing. So you just mentioned that when it's existing in the cloud, in that family, kind of the greater quantum field in that kind of way, why do things shift more quickly there than when it's more local?
Well, when it's stored in our neurology, um, it's physically based,
Okay.
and so when we're in this three-dimensional reality,
Yeah.
we experience time as a linear progression that moves in one direction from the past through the present into the future, right? That's not actually how time exists. Any physicist worth their salt will tell you that is not how time operates.
Okay.
Time is not a constant, it's not linear, and there sort of is no time to a certain extent, all things exist in now. So, but but it is a convenience while we're in the body. It gives us an experience of process of evolution. It's almost like a prism. You know how light coming through a prism is separated into component parts, and so we can see everything that makes up white light
Yeah.
in the colors in the visible spectrum. And so there is a way in which for human beings time operates like a prism to separate things into what seem to be separate parts,
Wow, that's beautiful.
but
Yeah.
that's not how time actually works. And so stuff that is held in our neurology, especially if it's manifested as a physical condition, it takes a while for physical conditions to manifest. And so sometimes it can take a while for them to unmanifest.
Hmm.
Sometimes not. Again, if it's not so much held in the neurology, then it can change much faster.
Hmm.
Um, people who have near death experiences where they go into this massive, quantum, all is one and all is love, they
Yeah.
often come back with either healed or with amazing healing powers, or they heal really fast
Yeah.
because that's a huge reset. It resets a bunch of their beliefs, not all of them.
Yeah.
Because if it resets all of their beliefs, they will have to relearn how to walk, talk, who they are, etc. But it resets enough of them that they get kind of a do-over, and a bunch of stuff shifts really fast.
Oh,
But if somebody is not having that kind of experience, often there's like if something happens, somebody, let's say worst case scenario, a parent physically damages a child, intentional, like they beat them, let's say. Okay, so there's the physical damage,
mhm.
and then there's the beliefs that inevitably all the meaning it gets made. The world is not safe, I'm not safe, something wrong with me, etc., and so forth. And then what happens is these beliefs tend to stabilize the condition. Like, for instance, if somebody has a skiing accident,
Yeah.
one person has a skiing accident, another person is violently sexually assaulted. Let's imagine they have the same injuries, exact same injuries. They're going to have very different healings, like a very different road to recovery, because one of them is going to be seen as just an accident, and one of them is going to have all kinds of traumatic meaning made about it.
Sure.
And so it's the meaning that tends to keep stuff stuck, makes it hard to shift. Because again, it's stored in a different part of the brain.
Yeah.
So did I answer your question? Because I think I
Well,
drifted a little bit.
in opposition to that, and us storing these meanings, the trauma, the history of that in one moment of time, in that timeline that you're talking about, in that one moment of time, um, we are meaning makers, so like being wrapping meanings around those events versus somebody who maybe just had a car accident, didn't wrap meanings around it, was just an accident, that's it, really simple. um, and the difficulty of being able to kind of pull that out, untie the knot, and then let that energy go. And then when we store things more in that quantum field, in that higher place, what's that opposition? Why is that easier to release than, what's stored in our neurology?
Because there's no time, no space there.
Mm.
Everything is now. And there is less need for a process. Now, sometimes people will still slow it down. So the thing is, because it is outside of time and space, you don't know. And if something shifts, you don't know when the change will manifest for the person.
Mm.
It could manifest immediately.
Yeah.
It could manifest later. It can manifest sometimes before the change seems to happen. Now
Mm.
that kind of freaks people out, but so I created this class called Money Magic in 2006, and it was all this NLP work focused on money. And then in 2008, I went to a matrix energetics workshop with Richard Bartlett and Melissa Joy, and it was a way of working with quantumly. They developed a set of it started with Richard Bartlett. Melissa Joy added her input, but it was a set of quantum tools.
Mhm.
And so after I took that, I added some of those tools into the field of the class. So before that, when people would take Money Magic in like the weeks, months after, we'd get feedback of, oh, this shifted and this shifted and this showed up. When I added those tools in, we started getting reports before the workshop. Like I signed up for the workshop and I got this huge raise. I got this big offer out of the blue. I even did a video once called Out of the Blue, because I'd have so many people say, out of the blue, this thing happened. Out of the blue, I got this huge blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And because it would happen after they registered, because that they had to register, because that was a contract to enter into the field. But once they entered into the field, then all kinds of stuff could start to shift around, even technically before they did the work.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing. And
Whenever I
yeah.
whenever I do that workshop on the first morning, I always ask, how many of you, since you signed up, have gotten unexpected like money and it's usually a third of the people. And then by lunchtime, more people come up and go, oh, I just remembered.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing. That's
yeah,
amazing. So really entering in, tapping into that quantum energy where there is no space, no time, no separation. And so these things are just sort of popping up
yeah,
at any point, But
yeah,
it requires, I love that you said also, it requires that first step. It
yeah.
requires that action, the exertion of free will in the 3D to
Yes.
be able to say like, yes, I'm doing this, I'm signing up for this is what my intention, it's intentional when you do that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this class a few times, the money magic. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, and sorry, it's just I'm known most for it. It's the most tangible thing that I do because the results are so trackable.
Yeah, yeah, I want to know more.
Yeah, yeah. So I was asked in 2006 to create this 2-day workshop on money. And at the time, if you knew me, that was like asking Vladimir Putin to do a 2-day workshop on nonviolent communication. It was like not a thing where you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Because I had zero relationship to money. I had zero interest in money, but I was so excited to be asked to do a class. I'm like, yes. And then I realized what I did, because I'm like, I know nothing about money. And so I thought I better learn. And then I realized that will never work. There's not enough time for me to learn about money. And so I thought, well, I will just lean into what I do know, which was because at that point I'd been taking people, over a decade, and 12 years or so, I'd been doing this change work. So I thought I will take these tools and I will apply them all to the context of money and take people through a series of changes. And I tried it all out on me first, just to make sure it didn't cause any, unsightly blemishes or bloating, water retention. And it seemed to be okay. And so then we did the first workshop, and it went fine. And they wanted me to do it then again the next year. And as I was getting ready to do it, I thought, you know what? It actually feels like I went back and looked at my money, and my income was up steadily 66%. I
Wow.
hadn't done anything differently again. But it was steady. It wasn't like there was a bump. And so I'm like, wow, if it will work on an NLP trainer, it will work on almost anybody. Because we're notoriously change averse. Like they say, you teach best what you most need to know, and I'm not a fan of change.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been doing it ever since, and in the weirdest way possible, it's taken me all over the world. Like
Wow.
the thing I had zero interest in, I wanted to teach a spiritual class, and I was given a money class.
Yeah.
And honestly, it has become one of the most spiritual things I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much of, what our capacity to create abundance, and it's money abundance, every kind of abundance there is, has so much to do with those beliefs that we hold, that framework, the lenses that we put on to look at the world. So, yes,
Yeah.
deeply spiritual work, I could just imagine.
Yeah.
Um, and there's that saying, what is it? Teacher, teach thyself, or something like that, where it's
Oh,
like, yeah,
physician, heal thyself. Yes.
yeah, that's it. That's it. That, all the tricks in the book. And so, yes, absolutely. You are definitely speaking to yourself as the first person, but
Yeah.
also, to have that experience to lead others is from your own experience. That's incredible. That's really great. So, this idea of creating more abundance, opening up, releasing limiting beliefs, releasing things that you no longer serve you is really big right now. People are talking about ascension,
Mhm.
getting rid of the old, moving on forward into the future, into the new. And so, yeah, money magic, what you're talking about right now, fits right in there as a tool. When you see people starting that journey and
Mhm.
they're making that transformation, releasing the old, moving into the new, what would you give them as like maybe one really great piece of advice on that journey?
I would say your job is to steer, not to paddle. And so many of us are paddling our buns off, trying to make things happen. And if all your energy is going into paddling, first off, you're not stealing and you're not steering so well, and you're exhausted. And it's not supposed to be hard. It really is not supposed to be hard. So if it's hard, it doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're inadequate or an imposter. It doesn't mean you're not deserving. It just means you've got patterning in the way.
Mm.
And that patterning is very hard to shift on your own. I mean, I've been doing this work almost 30 years. And when I have something up, I still go see somebody else
Yeah.
because we're blind to our own blind spots. But getting that stuff shifted, you have no idea. Even like a 1% course correction over time puts you in a very different place. And it's possible to make a much bigger course correction than 1%.
Wow, that's powerful. I love what you said. And also just saying, that even me, I still, when I have something up for me, I go and I find somebody else. That's so, I've received that. It's like, wow, that's so humble. It's so like realizing like who you are, that you're not gonna, believe the hype or whatever, like I'm some kind of guru, but I seek help as well. We're all on a journey. Every single one of us
Yeah,
is on a journey, and that it keeps going. And I also love the idea that, yeah, it's not meant to be hard, because that is something that I feel like even I've grown up with. Like, you've got to work hard. You've
gotta work hard. Yeah.
got to push, push, push. That's the only way you're going to create something, is you have to push really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we are pushing, what we are pushing against is actually our own beliefs. That's why it's hard. Because it's like one part of us is pulling us back, and one is trying to push us hard enough forward to overcome the part of us that's pulling us back. And in a war with yourself, who wins?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
Yeah. Once you're not pulling yourself back, and nobody does it consciously, but once you're not pulling yourself back, it's like the difference between if you lift weights, take 100 pounds and try and lift that. For some people, they can do it. Some people that would like crush them. If you're on the moon lifting 100 pounds, it's easier. Yeah.
Yes.
If you're in the space station where there is zero resistance, 100 pounds doesn't matter. And so the gravity that we experience is actually a function of our beliefs and
Wow.
our patterning.
Wow. That's powerful. And it's our beliefs and our patterning that we have some dominion over, and we can make that change.
Yes. Yes. And are encouraged to. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really a point of empowerment. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so taking that same question, but kind of flipping it on its head now,
Yeah.
when someone's on this journey, what would you say is maybe the biggest stumbling block that they run into? Like, what's that something common that you've seen before in the past as a stumbling block,
Mhm.
and you would say to folks like, hey, watch out, there's a big hole right here, I've seen people fall into the hole all the time, let me tell you about it before you even get there. What might that
Well,
be?
the three biggest things, or in the US, the three biggest things that keep people stuck is your belief structure, old safety patterning, old belief structure, um, unconscious family loyalties, those ancestral loyalties, or that, that desire to heal the family. And then the third thing, it falls under the belief category, but it's important enough to have its own finger, is our sense of our worth.
Mm,
Because almost none of us have a true sense of our worth.
yeah.
And so we struggle to prove our worth. We struggle to prove we deserve good things. We're the only species on the planet that does this. Like trees don't do it. They're
Yeah.
not riddled with self-doubt. Cats sure as heck don't do it.
No.
They are not justifying their existence. We're the only species on this planet that does that. And we when we're trying to prove our worth or get confirmation of it, that box never gets ticked because it's an inside job. The beliefs about our worth are in place by age 3.
Wow.
And unlike your phone, your brain is not designed to update itself.
Yeah.
And so almost everyone I meet at any rate does not have a robust sense of their worth. Because when you have a robust sense of your worth, it's not arrogance.
Yeah.
It is like the feeling of being in love. When you're in love, you feel good about the person you're in love with, you feel good about you, but everything and everybody looks so much more beautiful and precious, right? La vie en rose. And so that's what a true sense of worth is like. People who experience their worth aren't like, hey, let's go kill some people, or hey, let's go crush the competition. It's like everything is just beautiful and everything flows. And that's the experience I most want for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that leads into my next question is, in this work, where are we all headed?
Mm-hmm.
What is the vision of what is possible? And, what does that look like? Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've noticed there's a couple of pillars upon which our experience is built. One is feeling safe in our bodies and safe in the world. The other is having it be safe to love and be loved. And the third is a sense of our worth. And when those start to fill in, when we start to change all the beliefs about not being safe and get to experience safety and generate safety, when it starts to feel safe to love and be loved, and so we start to let ourselves be loved, and we just and sort of exude love, and then when we let ourselves feel our worth, then what happens is life becomes so magical. It is so much easier. It's not a zero sum. There's enough for everybody. There's no need to hoard stuff. There's no need to fight or compete. It's like this kind of very joyful co-creation where there's space for everybody, and it can be magical for everybody without it even being hard. We have the technology right now. The technology already exists on this planet for free energy. There's just so much fear coming from the people who have their whole livelihood is based on making money off, energy and some old structures. That technology has been buried, but it already exists. When everyone starts to know there's enough, you're okay, you will have enough, you will be okay, you don't need to hoard, you don't need to control other people, right? it can be good for all of us. The more people that step into that, the more that paradigm shifts. It's already shifting. Like that's where we're headed. It's going to be in waves. Not everybody's going to shift at the same time. That would be too much. So it's going to be like a chunk of people are going to step into that new reality. And then, then there'll be a little time delay. And then what we experience is a time delay. The next wave will come through. But the people who are listening to this are probably first wavers.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that vision of that, of, there's abundance for everyone. You're really taking that conversation and including now the bigger scene. We're talking about everybody on the planet. So your work that you do and the currents of things from that higher perspective, there's so much happening in the world right now. It's incredible. Like, oh, you know, one, where do you see that going? And then also, how does your work fit within that larger context? Like, let's take a really macro view of things. Yeah.
So if you've ever remodeled anything, if you've ever done any remodel in your house, then you know that from almost the day it starts till almost the day it's over, it's like chaos and you wish you'd never been born.
Yes.
And then afterwards, you have something beautiful. And so the world is in this gigantic remodel, actually. And it looks like chaos because so much is shifting and there's debris everywhere. When I was teaching people how to do this work, how to do NLP, we would tell our master's students, when it comes to an identity shift, when your identity starts to shift, it will feel like you're dying. And they'd be like, yeah. And we go, no, I don't mean like a metaphoric death. It'll feel like you're really dying. Like, yeah. And then it would happen to them and they'd come and say, I think I'm dying. And we'd say, no, it's an identity shift because the old identity is dying. And when our identity shifts, it does feel like a death, but it's, and they go like, no, you don't understand. I think I'm really dying. I'm like, yeah, identity shift. And so this is happening on a very big scale. And so it, this, end times. It feels like a death, but it is actually a planet-wide identity shift. Both the planet body itself is going through a shift, and the consciousness of humanity, and those two are tied. The consciousness of humanity is going through an identity shift. And so it's understandable it would be scary. It's understandable it would look like chaos, but that's what change looks like. Yeah. One more metaphor I'll give you. You know the old metaphor about the caterpillar and butterfly?
Yeah.
And it goes in the chrysalis. Do you know what happens in the chrysalis?
I think it turns almost to liquid or something.
It digests itself. Yes. Yeah. It digests itself. Probably not pretty. Yeah. And so here we are.
Yeah. Wow. I do think it is that. It is this kind of crazy chaos. It almost doesn't make sense. Like, where did that come from? Why is that happening now? That type of thing. But so if it is a kind of identity death and transformation that we're going through, and our ego's main job is to keep us safe and keep us alive in its perception.
Yes.
And if our ego senses death is headed down it's coming, where does our ego, what do we do with that? When we're experiencing this identity death, like I could just see my ego would want to go into overdrive, is trying to save my life and keep things in place, or even better, go backwards and step away from the situation. What do I do with that?
Well, look around you. Have you noticed how there's been so much actually forward movement in the last 50 years? And right now there's so many people trying to undo that, take it backwards. So we're getting greatest hits of the world's atrocities, right? We're getting racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, all kinds of nihilistic visions, right? So this is the whole reason I have a job, is because there are ways to help somebody through an identity shift where you can take the wattage on that fear down. Yeah. Because a lot of the fear is coming from a really old part of the brain that has very simple wiring. So when you can, it's sort of tricked itself into the illusion that it's in danger. So you can use the same way that it got stuck in thinking it was in danger. You can use, there are certain tools to update that part of the brain.
Mm.
And that makes a huge difference in how easily and how quickly and smoothly the transition goes.
Wow, that is very hopeful. I didn't realize there were ways to do that because the ego and that part of the brain seemed like it was such an old foundational, like unchangeable, frozen in stone
Mm-hmm.
part of your brain. So the idea that there are ways to help it along, help it change, that to me is a new message, really. Like, wow, I
Yeah.
didn't realize that that was possible. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
You just have to know how to access that part of the brain and get and do the update there. Because mostly we try to update up here,
Yeah.
literally in the cortex, and that's not where the patterning is stored. So yeah.
Powerful. That is powerful work. Incredible. I love that. And so I don't know. We're coming kind of close to the end of our time, but do you have any other message that maybe you want to share with this audience? Is there anything that you want to
Yeah.
leave us, a last thought that
Yeah.
you want to leave with us?
My teacher used to say, "We're not broken, lazy, or stupid," and I would add into that 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 all of you are more beautiful and magical than you could ever dream. The
Mhm.
only thing that's in your way is some old patterning, and that is revisable now. It doesn't have to be hard. Like I said, it's not your job to paddle; it's your job to steer. Like you're a creator, but you've been creating with 1 3/4 of your hands tied behind your back. And so it can be so much easier. It's meant now, it's time. It's actually time for it to be easier.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So it looks like we've come to the end of our time. But before we go, I understand that you brought a free gift with you today. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I believe it's access to a 3 part thing I did on Facebook, which was helping people get clear about what they want and find out what some of the beliefs are that might be in their way. Because you can't change something that you don't know is there,
Right, right.
right? So I believe that's what's in there.
Okay, great.
It's some kind of changey discovery thing in there.
Okay, great. So we will have a link to the three-part changey discovery thing on Michelle's speaker page. So you can find it there and really take advantage of that. It sounds like it would be a powerful tool, powerful experience to have with Michelle, further experiencing her work and what she does and the magic she brings to the world. So we'll have that there on Michelle's speaker page. Michelle, thank you so much for being here with us today, for sharing your wisdom, your joy, your light, energy. It really has been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you for this work, Suara.
Thank you, thank you. And to all of our audience out there, I hope that you have found this conversation to be inspiring, intriguing, and useful. Join us again tomorrow as we have another one of these talks and dive even deeper into other modalities to find what will work for you. And I'll see you there. Bye bye.